welcome to another episode of ohmTown Daily News. So, today, like most days, has been bombarded by the conflict. The news has been bombarded by what can only be said as an ongoing theme, which is Russia and Ukraine. Even dragging again astronauts, cosmonauts into the discussion about the color of outfits. Sure. Well, that was the beginning of my day. Sorry for all the kind of dead air that I'm dropping here. I want to talk about something other than just the news articles at the beginning of the start of each episode, but I don't know if anybody really wants to hear about espresso machines or the Large Hadron Collider or something like that when it's not really about the news. But maybe the random discussion is what people are interested in and not just the news. I don't know. But the ohmTown Daily News Show, which this is, really is about these 20 articles. And then hopefully I kind of pique your curiosity and I pull you into ohmTown.com and you find something of even more interest over there, as well as coming back and talking to me about what you find on ohmTown. I am hoping to expand this to about 2 hours a day, with the second half actually being just random discussion about the articles with greater depth from yesterday or the day before or the day before. I'm up to, I think, 78 episodes now. Those are getting posted over to YouTube faster than the podcast, so apologies if that's where you get them over on the podcast side. I promise that I will be uploading all of them, and that's really more of about the historical context of this show. I've only started it at the beginning of the year. That said, I really would like everybody to reach out to friends and say, hey, this is an interesting show, that kind of sends some links your way and you find it interesting. And then you can come over to the podcast or the YouTube channel or the Twitch show and talk with me about it and others, because there's a whole discussion board apparatus at ohmTown.com and over 250,000 articles that you can search through for a particular topic. Not to mention what the aggregator does 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, which is it reaches out, grabs a bunch of news, throws them into these 6 categories: create, news, education, entertainment, social, and technology. And then from there, throws it into close to 50 actual channels, shows that I hope to bring to Twitch. With that, let's get into the news. The first article is in the Daily News Show, and that's what this is. And it's about the former Apple employee charged with defrauding $10 million. And apparently the employee allegedly took kickbacks, stole equipment, and laundered money. That's interesting. So this article comes from the Associated Press. It's posted on ABC News. And it says here, a former Apple employee has been charged with defrauding the tech giant out of more than $10 million. And Dhirendra Prasad, 52, worked for 10 years as a buyer in Apple's Global Service Supply Chain Department. A federal criminal case unsealed Friday alleges he exploited his position to defraud the company in several schemes, including stealing parts and causing the company to pay for items and services it never received. It's fascinating when somebody has a gig that could be extremely lucrative, and maybe even treat it as a stepping stone, and then they use it for criminal enterprise. It's just fascinating. In the United States, you're going to end up getting caught. The way that everybody talks about it, is if you want to get rich, there's certain things that you can do, and I don't know, criminal enterprise just is not the thing that I want to do, because it's going to be kind of like a minefield. You never know when you're going to step the wrong way, and you're, as I was told by someone, actually, in my field, I get told this kind of often enough that they'll win the game, and that's just not how it works. You're not going to win the game if you're doing criminal activities. If you do, come and tell me what you did that you survived. It had to have been short-lived, but it says here, Prasad is scheduled to appear in court next Thursday to answer to charges of engaging in a conspiracy to commit fraud, laundering money, tax evasion, and that's the one that's really going to get you. Tax evasion. All that energy being spent on a criminal enterprise, and if you just did good with it, all that energy, all that smarts, eventually you get caught. So just don't do it. Man, it's just, why do people do this stuff? I mean, I know why. The reasons are myriad, but a lot of times people think that they don't have any other option to get rich. Not everybody can be filthy rich. Sure, the opportunities are there if you happen to be lucky enough to find one or make one. So the next article is in the Daily News Show as well. Oh, you know what? It was only the Associated Press in that last article. Yeah, there's no name to the article. So this here brings up this societal aspect of it. The previous article was bound by technology and business. This here is more about sociological forces. Former Kentucky clerk violated the law, basically, when they refused to issue two same-sex couples marriage licenses. And this here, it says, judge says same-sex marriage license denials violated rights. So let's click this link. Take us over to ABC News as well. It's written by Jonathan Matisse from Associated Press. And this has been going on for a little while. It says a federal judge has ruled that a former Kentucky clerk violated the constitutional rights of two same-sex couples who were among those whom she wouldn't issue marriage licenses. And I find this interesting, because this seemingly is going to end up going to the Supreme Court if if some people are believed, it will end up going to the Supreme Court. But in reality, I think your personal beliefs should not be preventing you from doing your job. If it's a job that you sign up for and your personal beliefs are impacting your conducting of your job, then leave the job. If you are harming other people for you to live up to your belief, then you need to skedaddle out of that job, because you don't have the right to lay sway arbitrarily over somebody else in your position, particularly if it's a civil servant job. If you are working for the state, if you are working for the country, if you're working for the town, you don't have a personal right to conduct your belief in the conducting of your job. You have a duty to perform. You do it. That's what you agree to. And that's really where it should lie. And it isn't impinging on your beliefs, because going into it, this is what you need to do. So you're part of a society, and you can't harm other people. Plus, fine, even if you don't want to do it, then you should assign the task to somebody else. Step away from your closed world. So it says here, Bunning reasoned that Davis cannot use her own constitutional rights as a shield to violate the constitutional rights of others while performing her duties as an elected official. There you go. Your rights end where my rights begin. So let it get codified. That's what I would like to see, is it end up being a federal embodiment and not just some local's opinion about how it should be conducted. If you want to get married to whomever you want. It's depending on your religious bent or political bent or whatever it is personal to you, and it isn't somebody else's belief system that should impact you. So we'll see. We'll end up watching this. This is another one for 2022 where we will see what ends up happening. So let's continue on to the next article. Otherwise, again, I will end up down the rabbit hole of discussion about this and my particular take on it. That's really, the value add here is that I'm making my own commentary on the matters. And sometimes I'll discuss some facts that I know, and other times it will be my personal opinion, and I pretty much spell it out that way. This next article is over at Far Weekly. Far Weekly is a U.S. government contracting show. I believe that people really have a misperception about federal contracting, what goes on, why it's expensive, why things happen the way that they happen. A lot of people think that it's arbitrary, rather capricious, that it's just throw darts at a bunch of contracts and hope which one lands one is the one that is either connected or most expensive or whatever. There's all kinds of reasons, but it's really misperception about what's going on. Happy to go into greater detail about certain things, certain questions. If you have them, feel free to ask them in chat, or I can even drag you into the live stream and throw you up there. I'll open up another window and have you zoom in, so to speak. It says here, spending on small business set-aside contracts took a dip recently. Well, the title of this article is 3 upcoming contracts women-owned small businesses should know about. And this here is when a person thinks locally of small business set-asides, they might think small business is small business, a mom and pop shop with a couple $100,000 of revenue. But that's not really what it is. We're talking about upwards of billions of dollars, but hundreds of millions per contract. It really depends on the agency what a small business set aside would end up being, to some degree. And so here it says small business set aside contracts took a dip recently, falling from nearly $10 billion to just below $8 billion between 2020 and 2021. I wouldn't be surprised if that continues, because production has been taking a hit and the supply chain is still wounded by the pandemic. We will see what happens as 2022 commences further down the line. But it says, but over that same period, the portion of those small business set-asides devoted to women-owned businesses rose from around $3 billion to around $4 billion. And this happens kind of regularly with the demographic playing a role in contracting. Like there are veteran-owned businesses, women-owned businesses that get a certain portion of government contracting. And it's not absolute. It gives them added benefit to the evaluation process of the contract, but it's always bang for buck. Where a contract officer and specialist evaluates the contract and then it gets awarded. But it gets a little deeper than that, so we can talk about it more later. But I want to quickly click this link. I already waited too long. This article is over at the federalnewsnetwork.com website, and it's written by David Thornton. And it has a little graph showing what the small business set aside is. I don't know. It seems like it's actually growing, but declining to some degree. Says that means Sanderson said right now it looks good for women in small business. To illustrate that, Sanderson looked at 64 opportunities coming within the next 18 months, specifically set aside for women-owned small businesses, and that it isn't an exhaustive list. And then they talk about more opportunities and where they might be. So you can go and look into government contracting. If you just do a search for government contracting, you'll find all kinds of information about it. But it isn't as easy as just, here, let me strike up a business and start applying. Past performance plays a big role. The range of competition plays a big role. You'll be evaluated as a business owner and basically as a person if you have the ability to fulfill the obligations of a contract. And you are competing with countless other people. Eventually, it gets whittled down to a few, but again, there's a lot more to it. So go over to that website and read this article about it. The next article is again in the Far Weekly channel. It's one of the ones that I would like to bring to Twitch. And I know that the little snippet is broken. I'm still noodling around with the aggregator, and it doesn't do what's referred to as what do you call it? Screen scraping. It isn't going to websites and scraping the raw data off of pages. It basically acts kind of like a search engine, but grabbing it in a different way. So it doesn't scrape from the website. So this particular article is titled Major DoD IT Contract Award Unsurprisingly Faces Bid Protest. Basically, a bid protest is when somebody argues that the contract shouldn't have necessarily gone to a particular awardee. Let's click this link and we'll just go straight to it. And it's actually a podcast, so it's the federal newscast, and you'd have to go over and listen to the entire thing. But the reason why I clicked it is because of that term right there, faces a bid protest. And I'm scanning it real quick to see if there's something in here that there we go. Okay, so it says, no surprise, DoD is facing a protest of its $11 billion IT contract award. It would have been too easy for the Defense Information Systems Agency, or DISA, to make the award for the Defense Enclave Services Program without having to survive a protest. And General Dynamics IT, the only other vendor besides the eventual winner, Leidos, to reach the final round, filed a complaint with the Government Accountability Office on March 10th. GDIT is challenging DISA's conduct of discussions, technical evaluation, price evaluation, past performance evaluation, and the resulting trade-off decision. Under the DES program, DISA wants to consolidate and modernize networks and technology that supports the Fourth Estate. GAO has until June 20th to make a decision on the protest. And all of these are actually industry terms within government contracting. So there is discussions that take place about the contract and what is needed. There's technical evaluations of those that are both what is needed and what is going to be supplied. The price evaluation is the cost that the contractors are offering up. Then past performance for those contractors is the historical record. I don't recall off the top of my head if all of them use the same past performance metric. I can't remember right now, but basically if a contractor has either failed or there were complaints about the conduct of the activity, it impacts past performance evaluation, and then the trade-off decision. The idea here is to get the best bang for your buck, but the people that are the companies that are bidding for this contract, it's a very limited number of people, and they subcontract out to other organizations within it, within the award. So you can have a bunch of people from General Dynamics hiring other companies to fulfill the obligations of the contract. As long as they meet the requirements of the contract, they can do it. So you can get sub-awardees that are funneled money through General Dynamics IT. But it's a limited competitive range, as it's called. And you end up with quite an expensive, but possibly out of bounds from retail. And again, that's just to get you to come and talk to me more about this. Because I don't want to spend too long on one particular topic during the daily news show. That said, you can always go over to the link that's in chat or in the description of this, either on YouTube or the podcast. So this next article, let's go on, is in the daily news show. And it is wrongfully convicted man sues Kansas County for $93 million. The Kansas man spent 23 years in prison for a double murder he didn't commit. And this is an ABC News article. Kansas City, Kansas. Man served 23 years in prison for a double murder he didn't commit, and he's suing for $93 million in damages from the county where he was convicted. And a former detective, he says, framed him. Lamont McIntyre, 45. He went into jail at 22. You gotta be kidding me. And his mother allege in a lawsuit filed in 2018, so it's already been underway for 4 years of arguing back and forth, I'm sure, that the unified government of Wyandotte County and Kansas City, Kansas, is responsible for the actions of former Kansas City, Kansas police detective Roger Golubski and other officers involved in his prosecution. Scrolling up, I won't read the entire article here in the stream, and but I will end up reading the entire thing. It says here, McIntyre's mom is also seeking $30 million. She and her son allege that Golubski coerced her into sex and then framed McIntyre for a double homicide in 1994 because she rejected the detective's later advances. Wow. So Golubski denies the allegations and has asked that they not be allowed as evidence in the case. If the allegations are admitted, he'll argue that he was a good officer during his career from 1975 to 2010 when he retired. And then McIntyre was freed from prison in 2017 after a local prosecutor asked the court to vacate his convictions and to drop all charges. In 2020, he was awarded a certificate of innocence and $1.5 million from the state. That's it, $1.5 million. So in Kansas, if you are arrested and put in jail for 23 years, yeah, you will end up. So I'm really curious why he was not allowed. Wait, so what are the grounds for it to be vacated? I mean, his convictions vacated and to drop all charges. Where is this? Maybe I can find this case and read more about it. But just so you know, if you get thrown in jail in Kansas City, Kansas, or at least in this county, Wyandotte, I guess, right? Is that it? Yeah, Wyandotte County. 23 years of your existence is worth $1.5 million from the state. Let's continue on with the next article. Don't you think that's a societal issue that should be addressed? Not just a legal one, but it's something that society should look at. Why is there immunity? This is in the Smack Talk channel. This next article is in the Smack Talk channel. Tim Cook responds to thank you note after Apple Watch saves dentist's life. Tim Cook has reacted to a thank you note after an Apple Watch helped save a dentist's life, saying he was glad that medical attention was sought and treatment received. Nitesh Chopra, a dentist in Haryana, India, felt discomfort in his chest, prompting him to use the ECG function of the Apple Watch Series 6 that he got. And got a reading. After seeing the results, Chopra and wife Neha consulted a doctor about the symptoms and reading. He was found to have a blocked artery, which led to the dentist receiving treatment, and after the intervention, Nitesh said he was blessed and can't express his gratitude to the Apple Watch. Well, isn't that wonderful to hear? This is an article over at Apple Insider. It's written by Malcolm Owen. And let me back up 1 second so that I can make sure that I said, okay, so the ABC News one, I'm really sorry that I'm bouncing back and forth, but the wrongfully convicted man article was from the Associated Press and was on ABC News. Now, this watch is over at appleinsider.com and it's written by Malcolm Owen. And if you've never seen this in action, if you've never seen the ECG activity, it's basically just an app and it reads the sensor on the back of the watch on the underside. And the sensor basically measures from you through the device when you just put your finger on the crown, and it measures electrical pulse through your body. And it tells you what your heart rate is. I mean, it's pretty amazing tech, to be carrying around. And for me, it actually monitors it as long as I'm wearing the watch. It's monitoring my pulse. And then at any time I can sit there and do a check. And with the right band, it can be an ongoing thing. In this particular case, you just touch that little crown when you're in the app and it measures it. I would like it to actually function every time I touch it without having to activate the ECG function. But anything that helps your health using technology is an amazing thing for modern living. I would really like one that does I've said this before in a previous episode, I would love to be able to do blood pressure and heart rate on the device, but right now it's just pulse. So it says at the hospital, an ECG was performed to monitor Nitesh's condition, but the couple was amazed at the accuracy of the Apple Watch's version. When I was in the CCU, my wife and I were continuously comparing our Apple Watch reading with the monitor, and they were in sync. Pretty neat. Go over to Apple Insider. You can read the rest of that article. So the next article is in the Stock Marketeers channel. This is the longest URL that I've ever thrown into my chat. It's in the Stock Marketeers channel, and it's titled in a section called Financial Crime. North Carolina man used Game of Thrones themed companies, White Walker, Khaleesi, and the Night's Watch in a $1.7 million COVID-19 relief fraud. Tristan Bishop Pan claimed the companies had tens of thousands of dollars in monthly payroll when in fact they employed no one. Again, it goes back to the criminal enterprise. Why dedicate so much time and energy? You're not Raymond Reddington from The Blacklist. Just give it up. Go and work a gig. The amount of money that you can make through legitimate business is staggering if you make those inroads. If you network, if you develop a new product, or you're good at a service. I guess, if you're only good at criminal enterprise, you might as well get familiar with the result of your criminal enterprise, which eventually you're going to get caught. Just don't do it. This is the second article now about overt criminal enterprise in business. So this article is over at MarketWatch, and it's written by Lucas I. Alpert. I think that's an I. Sometimes the font makes it an L, but I think that's an I. Let's see. It's funny, they got a picture of one of the White Walkers from Game of Thrones. Oh, and so you're not going to be able to see this in the podcast, but this is funny. It says, so there's a picture of a White Walker on a billboard or the side of a building, maybe. I think it's the side of a building, and it says winter is coming, right? And then never over at the edge. Maybe there's something else on this picture, but it has a big White Walker, right? But the caption for this article is Tristan Pan, not pictured here, was apparently a major Game of Thrones fan, given that he named several of his fake companies after characters or themes from the show. Okay, I had to make it clear. I guess it's the same reason why we have don't place bag overhead on plastic bags, because you can't take obvious as obvious. Common sense is not common, that kind of a thing. Well, it says, winter is coming for this guy. Wow, this writer is really cagey. Lucas Alpert. A North Carolina man is sentenced to 20 months in prison for fraudulently taking $1.7 million in COVID-19 relief funds for fake companies he created, including some which had Game of Thrones themed names. 40 years old, pleaded guilty to wire fraud last August for submitting at least 14 applications for Paycheck Protection Program loans, seeking over $6.1 million. And they ran an insurance agency in the Raleigh-Durham area. Wow, you know what? This upsets me more because it's in the Raleigh-Durham area, because they've got gigabit internet, symmetric gigabit from Google, and apparently other places have even higher in the area. And to sit there and do this kind of stuff when you have that, I have no chance where I am of getting gigabit. Let alone, well, gigabit symmetric is impossible where I am, apparently. I would have to pay something like $600 a month, I think it is. I don't know. Kind of outrageous. In this day and age, it's kind of outrageous. So ultimately received more than $1.7 million in benefits before they were caught. So I don't know how they caught any of that, or how they received any of that, considering there were no real humans in the company. The auditing process kind of fell on its face. So let's continue on to the next article. This too is in the Stock Marketeers channel. There's a third one after this, and all of the URLs are massive because they all go over to MarketWatch. This is financial crime again. A serial fraudster, a man of uncountable identities, a shapeshifter, as describes this con artist, posed as a doctor in $3.5 million lending scam, bought gold coins, and fled to Mexico. And you're not going to go far in Mexico. Joseph Corey ran the scam while on the run after being convicted of another medical fraud, prosecutor said. So let's go over to this MarketWatch article. Written again by Lucas I. Alpert. Interesting. So had different names, and was a serial con artist, 57 years old, used dozens of false identities and a bogus bank account to operate his frauds, and then laundered his proceeds by buying gold coins, which he took with him to Mexico after going on the run to avoid sentencing in one con. Joseph Albert Corey is a serial fraudster, a man of uncountable identities, a shapeshifter. He's not a shapeshifter. He looks pretty much the same in all of them, depending on the focal length of the camera. With a beard or without. Same dude. How they got away with multiple IDs, that's the siloing, the compartmentalization of information. So what's weird about it, though, is that there's a national crime database, and so if he had been caught in anything, once they scan his fingerprints, it should have popped up all of this. But I think all of this is coming to banking processes as well. So we'll we'll have to watch and see about this kind of thing. He does not have the capacity for responsibility or remorse, is what the prosecutors wrote in the sentencing memo. Yikes. They say he ran a doctor scam while he was on the run after pleading guilty in 2019 for stealing $370,000 from an international hotel chain by depositing fraudulent checks into accounts he'd set up. Wow. This guy. Again, the amount of energy to conduct a criminal enterprise in the United States, you will be caught. It may take a couple of years, but the result, your return on investment, is negative. The next article is concerning on multiple fronts, but it's in the Stock Marketeers channel, and it's the moneyest section on Market Watch. And I clicked this because I thought this was more of a societal, sociological thing. It has nothing to do with business. It has nothing to do with tech. But it's titled as a question where people write into the moneyest and they respond. But the question is, my husband said he's afraid I'll divorce him if he adds my name to the deed after 29 years of marriage. How do I convince him to put me on the deed to our home? And then the little snippet is, I have been by his side through several medical issues and 2 bouts of extended unemployment. So you click that link and you get taken over to Market Watch. And it's an article written by Quentin Fottrell, Fottrell. And let's see here. I recently, this is a letter that's written to Quentin, and I'll only read a small part of it. I recently found out that New York is not a community property state. I had thought that it was for 3 decades of our marriage. I'm not on the deed of the house that I've been living in for the past 29 years. This house was purchased while I was engaged 6 months before I was married. My husband contributed the down payment of $60,000. Well, it'll go through probate, as far as I know. I mean, you're married, so let's see here. At the time, it was decided to put only my husband's name on the deed due to my $85,000 student loan debt 30 years ago. Let's see here. 29 years of marriage, 3 children later, the house is still only in my husband's name. Yeah, not so easy. A lawyer told us that I would inherit the house in the event there was no will, but would have to go through probate to validate this, and cost of $20,000. Yeah, a 30-year-old house had better be paid off. So $20,000 to keep the assets in the marriage. Now, I'm not concerned about any of that. I'm concerned why a husband would think, after 29 years of marriage, I mean, this is the long con. If there is, if you're not convinced that your wife is going to stick by you after you put her on the deed, there's bigger issues here than keeping the estate. But yeah, I mean, it's, so let's see what Quentin says here. You use the word fear or a derivative of that word 4 times. You made it part of your sign off. There's a lot in your letter about what might happen that has not actually happened, including the unlikely prospect that you'll lose your home due to your husband's medical issues. Yeah, if you're married, it doesn't even matter. I mean, you can still lose your home if you can't pay your debts, married or not. It does happen, unfortunately. The Community Service Society released a report last November concluding that between 2017 and 2018, 56 hospitals imposed 4,880 liens on the homes of their patients with unpaid medical bills, while collecting over $442 million in state funds called the Indigent Care Pool to support their provision of uncompensated care. Yeah. Medical debt can bring you down pretty fast. And a lot of people think that they are prepared for something like this, but they are not. You are woefully unprepared for medical debt. This alone, this person talking about 30 years of marriage and trying to keep the house or whatever, that wouldn't save this from being taken by a hospital and medical to recover medical debt. It's messy and it's long, and at the end of it, it's expensive for everybody involved, but more expensive for the person who has to deal with the medical issues and the medical debt and the legal aspects of it. So get prepared. Start investing when you're young. If you're in my chat and you are, well, at any age, you should start investing. And if you are young, start investing now. Start investing early. Start investing. Go mow lawns, for crying out loud, and start making money. I mean, people will pay, depending on where you are, $40 a mow. $20 a mow, and you can just bang it out, a bunch of them every weekend, and sock it away. Don't touch it. Go invest it in stocks that provide dividends every quarter, and by the time you're my age, you'll be able to just wake up one day and quit work. So let's continue on to the next article before I start traveling down that road. This article is over in the Mobile channel. Has to do with school masks. It's in the United States, but it can apply anywhere, really. Whenever the mandates lift, COVID starts picking up again. It's pretty much the standard flow of things. If you remove the protections, then the illnesses increase. School mask mandates have lifted, but COVID isn't over for students and teachers. Teachers are still grappling daily with issues that COVID has left in its wake, most of which defy easy solutions. So let's click this link. It takes us over to New York Times. It says, news analysis. I still just worry. 3 teachers on COVID's long shadow over American schools. And the article's written by Kaylin Belsha, Melanie Asmar, and Lori Higgins. And it says, Ms. Belsha and Ms. Asmar are reporters at Chalkbeat, a nonprofit news outlet focused on education, with which this article is being co-published. Ms. Higgins is the bureau chief for the Chalkbeat Detroit. Okay, so it looks like there's a bunch of discussion. Minutes later, he stormed into the hallway, slamming the door in Ms. Burrow's face. Walk me through that moment you just had, she said. Middle school teacher signaled for a 7th grader wearing Crocs to hang back. Let's see. The student had struggled to manage his emotions before the pandemic. A year spent at home when classes were fully remote without the neutral ground that school provided had intensified his anger. So this goes back to basically behavior. So this is a sociological thing, not really about the illnesses. But it says here, but just as the pandemic's emotional and academic toll on students grew clearer last fall, staff shortages hobbled schools. When the virus seemed like it was under control, the Omicron wave brought it all back, and now we're dropping the mask mandate. So in the United States, it's state by state, actually institution by institution, unless you have a really wonky governor or political leadership throws a bunch of undue influence on you to do something that you think is best for students and society. But some people just, they don't care because they are sociopathic, antisocial. They don't care if you become a long hauler because they didn't get sick. And so it doesn't hit home quite enough, right? But I guarantee you, if somebody were to lose their mother to the pandemic, they would change, unless you traverse from sociopathic to psychopathic. But you can go over and read the rest of this article. There is a lot of burden on children today because of the pandemic. They've spent a lot of time out of class, and those social forces that change the dynamic. There's a lot of kids that basically have forgotten how to act around other people not in their family because they're not hanging out with a bunch of kids their age and growing up together. This next article has to do with Koch Industries. This is in the Hatch Ideas channel, which is about business and intellectual property. And the title is Pressure Mounts on Koch Industries to Halt Business in Russia. Quick jump forward. They've already said that they're not going to leave Russia. While hundreds of other companies have paused operations, 3 Koch subsidiaries are still operating in the country. And they are kind of tagged as, not kind of tagged, they are regularly tagged as right-wing billionaires. But other family members are not in the same vein, but 2 of them definitely are, based on all reports that I've read. And so they're going to stay. And they've got a lot of production. They own that, their company, Koch Industries, owns a lot of raw material productions, like paper products. And because you consume, you have to keep on buying. You can't get away from paper products for the most part. So like Georgia Pacific makes all kinds of wood products, from regular old paper, like toilet paper, all the way up to paneling and stuff. It's pretty broad. But they're going to stay in Russia with all of these sanctions that are underway. This is an article from The Guardian. Dominic Rush in New York wrote the article, and basically is going to say what I just said. I haven't read this article, but it says here, in a statement released on Wednesday, Dave Robertson, Koch president, condemned the invasion, but basically said, Koch company Guardian Industries operates 2 glass manufacturing facilities in Russia that employ about 600 people. We have no other physical assets in Russia, and outside of Guardian, employ 15 individuals in the country. While Guardian's business in Russia is a very small part of Koch, we will not walk away from our employees there or hand over these manufacturing facilities to the Russian government so that it can operate and benefit from them. Well, when you throw that out there, Putin might do it anyways, just nationalize all foreign assets and give it to people locally. I mean, that's there are other countries that do that now. So I guess we'll see what happens here. There's already public outcry about this, and we will see if social forces impact the bottom line of Koch Industries. But they're billionaires. They'll weather the storm. And while regular Joes like me have to consider the prices for things, it isn't always the same for everybody. Billionaires don't really need to worry or care about your struggles. This next article is in the Warcrafters channel. A tangle of Christmas lights twinkle in the mantelpiece behind a man who is reading the new Ruth Ozeki book aloud. This article is titled, This Website Only Shows You Twitch Streams No One Else is Watching. I'll probably be on it. To be honest, I might be on it right now. I would have never crossed paths with this reader if it weren't for Nobody.live, a web art project that dredges up viewerless broadcasts from the subterrestrial layers of Twitch. Wow. Log on and you'll be paired with Halo deathmatches, Dark Souls speedruns, and Madden blitzes that have been emanating into the ether like unanswered phone calls. Pick up and the spectator count will change from 0 to 1. We'll click this link, takes us over to PC Gamer, and it says the creator of Nobody.live on the weird thrill of being a Twitch streamer's only viewer. It's pretty interesting. I've done this before. I've gone into random no viewer streams, and for the most part, people respond kindly. say hello, and they're watching the chat populate with that one person. And sometimes it's a great discussion, and sometimes there's no discussion. They're just recording something, and it's turned into a VOD for 14 days, and then poof, gone. It says it's possible to become fabulously rich and famous as a professional streamer. Ninja, Pokemon, Tifu. These are all the anomalies that somewhere around, somehow they went viral. There are people that streamed 100,000 plus streamers, but you can make a livable wage on dramatically less. So go over to PC Gamer and you'll be able to check out more about this article, but you can always go to nobody.live and see content makers that are streaming through Twitch with no viewers. And who knows, like I said, you might find me. The next article is in the Stock Marketeers channel. And deep dive, the 8 worst performing S&P 500 stocks with the highest ratings are expected to rebound by more than 50% over the next year. This is a list. Favored stocks for bounce backs include EPAM, PayPal, Meta, and Netflix. If you click the link, you'll get taken over to MarketWatch. And this article is written by Philip Van Doorn, Doorn, and has a dude, I guess, on a pogo stick in the desert. Interesting. So they always have a bunch of referenced tickers at the top of their articles. But if you are interested in discounted stock that you might be able to afford and you want to take some risk, go and check these out. But know that right now I think the lowest stock ticker on here is Las Vegas Sands Corp at $32.09 a share, with their closing price listed on March 14th. So they think that it'll go to 5204. And they have Meta. It says Meta Platforms Incorporated Class A shares. And the ticker is still FB, so Facebook. They think that it'll go to $315. Well, $314.80. I'm not so sure about any of this. I might check out EPAM, but only because of the performance upside. They think that it'll double. Not so sure about that. So let's go on to the next article. I'm running woefully behind. And this next article is a New York City clean air program pays citizens to report idling trucks. This is an alarming trend, but it's been in other sectors for quite a long time. Namely, in other states, the states are basically, or cities are saying, turn these people in and we'll give you money. And it's kind of pitting person against person. But I understand the intent. The objective in this particular sense is a New York City clean air program allows citizens to report idling commercial vehicles in exchange for a cut of the fines, and some drivers respond with fists. And it just seems like it pits person against person. And if you're standing there outside a truck, somebody might try and assault you. So be careful if you're going to do this. $87.50 for 3 minutes inside the hot market for videos of idling trucks. It's a New York Times article written by Michael Wilson. And it has photographs and video by Sarah Blesner. I won't read much of this article or show the entire article. It's just not in my nature. I want you to click the link. I want you to go over to New York Times and read the entirety of it. But the idea really is setting a bounty on whatever it might be, which pits person against person. This kind of thing exists in other areas, from the green sector to cybersecurity to business processes to all kinds of places. If you can find some way, there's bounty programs in a lot of things. And this basically is a bounty program. I mean, Texas has it about abortion. This is about cars idling in New York. And the context is what matters. You know, it says here, if everything goes as it should, he just earned $87.50 and maybe more for those few minutes of time. And the company that owns the truck will receive a fine of at least $350 that it never saw coming. But for now, Mr. Slapicus is off down the block, a bounty hunter jauntily seeking his next target. And quote unquote, easy pickings, said former Marine and retired computer specialist from Woodside. Yeah, I suppose so. But the context matters, you know. Why is the truck idling? It could be dropping something off, and there's somebody inside dropping off something. And it says people to report trucks that are parked and idling for more than 3 minutes or 1 minute if outside a school. Wow. Interesting. 3 minutes of idling means you're going to get a $350 fine. Not quite on board with that. Needs greater fidelity. This next article is mail ballot rejections surge in Texas with signs of race gap. A new Republican voting law led to the sharp rise in rejected ballots in the state's recent primary election. As analysis shows, black areas of Houston disproportionately had votes thrown out. Strange that, but I'm sure it's not systemic, right? People aren't being marginalized, right? Everybody's vote is equal, right? I agree that we need to address how voting happens in the 21st century. But when there's disproportionate activity, there might be a problem. So this article is over at New York Times, written by Nick Corasanidi. And it says more than 18,000 voters in Texas's most populous counties had their mail-in ballots rejected in the state's primary election this month, according to a review of election data by the New York Times. A surge in thrown out votes that disproportionately affected black people in the state's largest county revealed the impact of new voting regulations passed by Republicans last year. In Harris County, which includes Houston and is the state's most populous county, areas with large black populations were 44% more likely to have ballots rejected than heavily white areas, according to a review of census survey data and election results by the Harris County Election Administrator's Office. Why is that? I wonder why that is, right? Does it seem to imply that election fraud only comes from black voters? Could that? I hope I'm oozing enough sarcasm so that people don't think that I'm really questioning this. It's really odd that there would be a 44% greater chance of a ballot being rejected simply because you're from a county with a high black population. I mean, how does this not get seen? Okay, well, again, it's one of those things. And I did some research in the 2020 election, and I predicted the 2020 election just shy of, I missed it by 3 states. If I recall correctly, I'd have to look at the data again. With 2 states, the only reason why I missed them is because I looked at the data and I did a threshold cut on my data. And because that that threshold was a little too high, it swung the vote the other way for those two states. So in all, and in the other states, I was off by maybe 1% with the data that I had collected. And I would love to go into greater detail. I'm actually trying to get the latest census data where I can mill through it, but I don't have access to it all. So let's continue on to the next article. This next article is in the Mobile Channel. It says America has a free speech problem. And people have an odd perception of what free speech is. So let me click this link. It says a new poll finds Americans very anxious about the state of free speech. But people have an odd perception of freedom of speech. This is written by the editorial board, New York Times. For all the tolerance and enlightenment that a modern society claims, Americans are losing hold of a fundamental right as citizens of a free country, the right to speak their minds and voice their opinions in public without fear of being shamed or shunned. That is not freedom of speech. This social silencing, this depluralizing of America has been evident for years, but dealing with it stirs yet more fear. It feels like a third rail, dangerous for a strong nation and open society that is dangerous. So I'll end up reading the rest of this, but I encourage you to go over to this article and read it. But they talk about however you define cancel culture, Americans know it exists and feel its burden. Cancel culture is societal's response to actions that it doesn't agree with, and people that it doesn't agree with. And when we didn't have the ability to go viral, it meant that you were being impacted in a microcosm, so the people around you would avoid you. You couldn't impact the mass, and the mass couldn't impact you because you were few. Now with things like TikTok and Twitter and Facebook and YouTube and even Twitch and wherever else, mass amounts of people can circle around a cult of personality. You have the ability to leverage it either for good or for bad, depending on which side of the fence you are of the argument at hand. That's not cancel culture. That's society responding to one thing or another, the perceived bad actor, whatever it might be. And sometimes the cancel is accurate, it's apropos, it's on target, it's precise. Sometimes it's completely off base and you end up with people being harmed by the cancel culture because there was either a missing context, which you'll hear me say in a lot of my episodes, or outright missing information, outright lies, things like problems with the mask or the virus. That isn't part of this discussion. The misinformation isn't involved in this, but it gets pulled into cancel culture because there are people out there that will cancel somebody for being on the wrong side of whatever perception is being canceled. I'm trying to be as general as possible in this context, in this discussion. But cancel culture is the viral version of what society does in a microcosm of a smaller society element, a smaller group. If you go to a bar and you're a complete ass, you will be canceled in that microcosm. If you go online and you spout a bunch of bogus garbage, you can be canceled on the macro side of things, with people even going to your employer and saying you need to fire this person. And that's basically the larger, well, it says here, it says, how has this happened? In large part, it's because the political left and the right are caught in a destructive loop of condemnation and recrimination around cancel culture. So really, this is a sociological dynamic that has existed from the dawning of time. People have been ostracized from their community because of doing the wrong thing, right? Now it's just amped up. It's given power beyond the microcosm and can go around the world in a heartbeat, ruining careers simply because of the implication of impropriety. Or 25 years ago making a bad joke, but because it's been posted online, it now is part of your digital genetic code and will follow you everywhere and haunt you forever. So if you haven't been caught yet, you better delete it. But warn you, the internet never forgets. But continue on, go over to New York Times and read the rest of this article. Even if you don't agree with it, let it challenge your preconceived notions. If you agree with it, then understand that there are other people that are of like mind, but also understand there are people that don't necessarily agree with everything that's being said wholeheartedly, and you need to respect that as a human being. The next article is in, and I'm gonna have to move on, I'm sorry. The next article is in the Daily News Show. Baker Hughes joins oil rivals in pausing Russian operations. The Houston-based business reacts to U.S. sanctions on Russia. This has already been discussed again and again. This article is over at ABC News. Not this particular thing, but the topic of sanctions. This is just another company, Baker Hughes, a major U.S. oil services company. This article is written by Ann Dinosenzio. I'm sorry, I had to pause to catch that whole name. Ann Dinosenzio. And the reason why I brought it up, let's see here. Hold on a second. Yeah, I'm just gonna kind of drop this out there. You can go over to ABC News and read the rest of this. Because a lot of companies are withdrawing from Russia, and now Russia has, and the reason why I brought it up is because Russia has now announced that any company that pulls out of Russia will now basically be frozen out for 10 years. And in my opinion, the economic sanctions that lead to a company leaving Russia and then Russia saying you can't come back for 10 years is doubling the impact of the economic sanctions. Because companies can go elsewhere. Companies can focus on expanding their operations in other countries and make their money back. They can focus on optimizing their efficiency and make their money back. They can provide additional service, value-added services, and gain customers. They can increase the customer experience and even charge more, a little bit more, and make their money back, but don't price gouge. If you price gouge, people like me will sit there and say, well, then, I just won't go anywhere, and you won't get that oil money. You won't get me paying for gas. And no, nowadays I won't even use it. I won't eventually go and fill my tank up a whole lot more because I'm going to be traveling all over the place. No, I'm going to be using what I use now. All of this technology that I have at my disposal, I'll be using that to avoid driving anywhere. Do I need to go on vacation or whatnot? No, not really. There's a lot of people that are perfectly happy living right there at home. There's a lot of things that you can do around your neighborhood, around your house, around your state without driving for hours and hours or flying anywhere. Here's another one, all about inflation and price gouging. This isn't really price gouging so much as the cost of everything around this is causing rates to go up. In this case, it's in the Stock Marketeers channel. Rising mortgage rates are no doubt a headwind for housing demand. Mortgage rates soar above 4% for the first time since 2019. So rising rates threaten to pressure homebuyers' budgets as the popular spring season for the real estate market gets underway. Now, this is a MarketWatch article. It's written by Jacob Passy. And if you did not refi in the last 6 months, you're in some serious trouble now because the mortgage rates are going up. And let me see. Sorry for the dead air. There's might be some music that you can hear. Yeah, so you're gonna. I am thinking that we are gonna end up back in the 7% range of mortgage rates by the time this is over. We're already at 4, so if this doesn't get remedied, which is inflation in general, and conflict continues or it expands beyond between what is now, well, there's actually a lot of countries that are bombing the hell out of other countries, oddly enough, but or conflict on the edges of countries. And but if more issues expand into oil producing countries, we're looking at somewhere around 11-12%. So it basically brings us back to the 70s era interest rates. But for more information, go over to this MarketWatch article that I threw in chat, because mortgage rates in particular are going up. And again, the idea of these costs scale with the socioeconomic status of the person. So you might be able to take care of yourself now, but when costs continue to increase, you may not be able to. And that is very unfortunate. And it's, in my interpretation, I think it's because people with the means to produce goods, right? These raw materials, actually, it goes all the way back to the raw materials. They are taking a whole lot of money off the table earlier than later, and therefore prices are increasing dramatically across the entire supply chain. But those organizations, those people that are making that price determination are already billionaires. Again, in my understanding, my belief, in my reading of the room. This here is Dispatches from the Pandemic. It's an article that is in MarketWatch. My aggregator threw it into Stock Marketeers. The little snippet says, people looking for a relaxing getaway will face high prices regardless of how they plan to travel, and here's how to save money. So if you click that link that's getting put in chat here, the title is, at $4.39 a gallon for gas, it was going to cost me more to drive there and back than it is to stay at the hotel. Americans rethink spring travel plans. So for some of us in the US, we've got spring break coming, and people are probably going to be going nuts again, just like they did last year. But it's going to be at a completely different price point, and I'm not sure what the profiteering is going to have. It's going to be rough for a lot of people who think that it's going to be inexpensive, and it's not going to be. So this article is written by Jacob Passy. People looking for a relaxing getaway will face high prices regardless of how they plan to travel. And they go into some detail, I suppose, about what it's going to cost. Hotel room costs 150 nights, she said. But this year, the cheapest one that they could find was twice that. Yep. So over the last decade, a ton of money was thrown into the system, and it hasn't been retrieved. And so there's a lot of money sitting around, and some people have it and others don't. And I would argue that the ones that don't are willing to spend it and never really had it to begin with, right? So all of these infusions of money were expended into enterprise, not to the middle class. It was put into the upper class and maybe the lower upper class, and it never even reached the regular Joe. So, but costs, and it says travel costs are rising across the board. No, costs are rising across the board in general, not just travel. Everything is. But I want you to go over to this article and check it out. And let me hurry and get through this so that I do the full list that I selected. This next article, MobiFox Apple Watch band review, licensed straps from your favorite brands. MobiFox's ever-expanding lineup of licensed brands makes it a great go-to source for character-driven Apple Watch bands from silicone to leather. This article is over at Apple Insider, written by Andrew O'Hara, and it has the Mandalorian's helmet stamped onto a leather band and the latest Apple Watch. And that watch face is really nice. It's reminiscent of another. Hold on a second. What is it called? A Renaissance. That's right. RESSENCE, I think it is. Yeah. The 3BBB, I think it's called. The Apple Watch, I guess this is the latest iteration of it. Might be a Series 7. Anyway, there's a very expensive $250,000 watch called the Renaissance, RESSENCE, and it's oil-filled, a mechanical watch, oil-filled mechanical watch with over 250 pieces that make up its mechanical aspects. A beautiful watch, by all accounts, mechanical marvel in my estimation, but it is, I think, $250,000, if I remember right. It depends on which watch you get. So here, let me see if I can pull it up. In the meantime, these MobiFox watch bands have different licensed brands included in it. Let's see, is this it? It might not be as expensive as I thought it was, but there's too much dead air here, so I'm not gonna. I'll have to go and find out what the price is because I don't remember it. But it's somewhere above $50,000 as far as I recall, but I think it's in the $250,000. At any rate, sorry for the distraction. That's kind of my nature. The article, MobiFox Apple Watch Band Review, Licensed Straps from Your Favorite Brands, is written by Andrew O'Hara. And I love the Apple Watch and its ecosystem. The watch bands from various manufacturers are great. This being in the article, it has like Boba Fett and it was Boba Fett, not Mandalorian, because Mandalorian doesn't have the little antenna. Yeah. Anyway, go over and check out that article. I'm going to continue on to the next two articles. I got three altogether. Kanye West is barred from performing at Grammys due to concerning online behavior, says the Rep. This is in the Continuity Report channel. And let's see. It's an article written for Variety. And it says, reps for the Recording Academy and CBS, which presents the Grammys, did not immediately respond to Variety's request. So his online behavior, this article is written for Variety by Jem Aswad. And yeah, there's been some discussion about Kanye West's behavior. And it just seems part and parcel to the social dynamic with the internet engaged. People tend to believe that they can say and do anything they want online. But society is what society is. And it really, when you are in close proximity to people, it doesn't have the same dynamic, mainly because you don't get impacted by so many people. It's more siloed. It's a smaller enclave of people. But it says, based on his social media posts and activity in the past few months, he might use the stage to continue his online harassment of Pete Davidson, his estranged wife Kim Kardashian's new boyfriend, He could attempt to lobby public sentiment for custody of his children, which there are tweets basically kind of impinging Kim Kardashian. He could make some statement in support of accused sexual offender Marilyn Manson or unrepentant homophobe DaBaby, both of whom he has featured in his recent concerts or listening events. He could make more misguided statements about slavery or revive his stumping for President Trump. This just continues on. To me, it's like a slow motion train wreck, maybe much like my streaming here on Twitch might be a slow motion train wreck. But I'm not doing any of those things that Kanye are doing, and I never will. This next article is in the Mobile channel, and for all accounts, I'm not as talented as Kanye. I'm not a musician. Anyway, man posing as students convicted in $1.4 million loan scheme. Elliot Sterling of Louisiana falsified nearly 200 financial aid applications and spent at least $250,000 of the money at casinos, prosecutors said. Again, we're back at the criminal enterprise, enriching yourself, and you will get caught. People, stop being a criminal. This is an article over at the New York Times by Amanda Holpuch. And Louisiana man was convicted on Wednesday of defrauding the federal student loan system of more than $1.4 million in an elaborate scheme that involved posing as students and hiring impersonators to get financial aid he then pocketed. Wow. So all of these co-conspirators are also going to be charged. Mr. Sterling, who was 32 when he was charged in September of 2020, took most of the financial aid money for himself and spent more than $253,000 of it at casinos in Louisiana, Nevada, Pennsylvania. Let's see. FBI had seized about $422,600 of the proceeds, which the jury ordered to be forfeited. Gee, you think? Mr. Sterling, who does not have a law degree, represented himself in court. I'll just leave it right there. This next article is Deep Dive 10 Highest Yielding Dividend Aristocrat Stocks for Uncertain Times as Interest Rates Rise and Economic Growth Slows. I have said this in previous episodes. You cannot have constant economic growth. It isn't possible. Every company that keeps on pushing the limit of 10% this year, 15% the next year, you don't have the ability to outstrip the population. Yes, I know that there's a more complex response to that, but the fact is you cannot keep pushing. Usually what happens is something has to suffer. Everything that I say ends up being anecdotal because I can't provide direct evidence on the fly in a random stream. But we can talk about it more if you want. Just come over to ohmTown.twitch. ohmTown.twitch. I am a derp. Go over to ohmTown.com or to twitch.tv/ohmTown, and we can talk about it. This here says, these companies have long records of raising dividends, providing comfort for investors as rising interest rates lead to stock market jitters. Click this link, you get taken over to MarketWatch. This thing has been updated since March 16th all the way up to this morning. And it says these companies have long records of raising dividends. So dividends basically pay you to own the stock every quarter. Typically every quarter they throw you some money. Hopefully the intent is so that you can buy more stock. Depends on when, if you are being smart about it, you'll buy it when it's low, even when the dividend comes in. But they go into a list of stocks that might be of interest to people. And it's down here at the bottom. And so that right there is the dividend yield, like IBM. It does a 5.22% dividend yield. You would have to go and look at the actual stock. Right now, IBM is at $128.76. So you would have to wait for what the actual dividend is going to be each quarter. And you get you get a dividend for each share that you hold. And goes all the way down this list here. So go check it out. And the article again is over at MarketWatch. And this one, sorry for the fast scroll, is written by Philip Van Dorn. And with that, I'm going to have to call it quits. Thank you for coming. Thanks for hanging out. I hope you enjoyed the show. It'll be over on YouTube in a couple of days, maybe tomorrow. It really depends on how fast I can get to it. And then the podcast. And I'm behind on the podcast. Apologies. And I'll see you tomorrow at 6 p.m. Bye-bye.